This area south of 5th Street is packed with tiny alleyways and some of the oldest buildings on Miami Beach. It's the area just north of Government Cut and south of 5th Street. In the late teens and early 1920s, it was a vibrant area and the site of a wave of new residents. Many of these early pioneers were Jewish who came to South Florida to start a new life. Here we are on the corner of Washington Avenue and 3rd Street, right around the corner from Joe's Stone Crab, home of the Jewish Museum of Florida.
Let me show you where we're at. Here's the southern tip of the beach. We're right here. I thought we'd go in and visit the museum. It's the oldest synagogue on Miami Beach and also has a tremendous story about the Jewish migration to the area. Afterwards, we can leave here, we can move in a northeasterly direction just a couple blocks over to the ocean. There's Lummus Park there, and I want to tell you the story of the early developers of Miami Beach at that point.
Well, why don't we go in and take a look at the museum first?
Sounds good.
Look at all these beautiful stained glass windows, almost 80 of them. They're magnificent.
You know, the amazing thing is the rabbi of this congregation designed these windows, and they were manufactured in Miami.
What is the historical significance of this location?
This is the oldest synagogue on Miami Beach. The congregation was founded in 1927, and 2 years later a synagogue was built. And as it grew, it essentially outgrew the size of the building, so they designed this building. Henry Hohauser, the foremost architect of Miami Beach during the Art Deco era, he was the architect for this congregation, and he designed this beautiful edifice here. They moved in 1935, and it's had a wonderful history. So many interesting people have been members of this congregation. For example, Meyer Lansky, the famous gangster, or the Grossinger family of Catskill resort fame in upper New York State.
Amazing. We said earlier that Joe's Stone Crab was one of the first Jewish-owned businesses on the beach.
That's right. Jews had been in Florida since the middle 1700s, and in fact there was a growing small Jewish community in Miami Beach in the 1910s and 20s.
But they weren't always welcome, were they?
They really weren't. In fact, if you look at some of the hotel brochures, you'll see that many are restricted to Gentiles only, and the message sometimes is subtle, but at other times it's outright racist or anti-Semitic. But by the time the synagogue was built next door in 1929, most Jews in the early immigration were confined to south of 5th Street because of deed restrictions. It was almost like a shtetl in that respect. But it was a thriving, very vibrant community, and it became one of the most important on early Miami Beach and actually set the stage for a lot of other Jewish migration in subsequent generations.
This is a very interesting neighborhood south of 5th Street. It's really one of the oldest on the beach.
You're right, because the beach developed from the south to the north. And this neighborhood itself has so many interesting nooks and crannies, so many colorful places, one of the most important of which was the old 5th Street gym.
It's not standing anymore, though.
It was raised about a decade or so ago, but in its day it was one of the most famous gymnasiums in the world. The Dundee brothers came down from New York at the outset of the 1950s, and they trained a stable of great fighters, including Cassius Clay,
who later became known as Muhammad Ali.
Arguably one of the greatest fighters of all time.
Beautiful oceanfront park was never developed.
I have the answer for you. The Lummus brothers, who were developing south of 5th Street, sold this to the brand new town of Miami Beach in 1915 for $40,000.
What a bargain.
They realized the error of their ways soon after and tried to buy it back, and Miami Beach said, we're not selling this back to you, especially at that price.
So how do we still have it as a park today, then?
Simply because there are deed restrictions that say you can't develop this property in any other way but what it is today.
Now, we're standing on Ocean Drive. I'm looking at the backdrop of Art Deco hotels. What was the first hotel built?
Well, interestingly enough, the first hotel is still standing. It's down at 112 Ocean Drive, the Brown. Matter of fact, the Brown Hotel. Let me show you this photograph of the Brown. It was built in 1915, supposedly atop a sunken ship, although we have no evidence that really points that out. It's just a simple rectangular building, 2 stories in height. That area down there is just booming. Real estate values have skyrocketed. They're getting ready to restore this hotel, in fact, as part of that whole area.
Paul, who were some of the early players developing Miami Beach?
There were about 3 or 4 major players. The first was John Collins. He came down here as part of an ill-fated coconut plantation experiment. In fact, let me show you a picture of him. This is John Collins right here. Came from New Jersey, got into coconuts, decided that wasn't the way to go, got into an avocado orchard, eventually decided this was a tourist place. Built a bridge called the Collins Bridge, where Venetian Causeway stands today, in 1912. Ran out of money almost 3/4 of the way through, would get a loan from someone else who I'll mention in a minute and complete that bridge. At the same time, he and his son-in-law created something called the Miami Beach Improvement Company in 1911, and that was the first development in this particular area.
Now the Lummis brothers come in.
Lummis brothers are very important. At the same time, in fact, as Collins was developing, they were developing south of 5th Street over here, a middle-class community. And then, of course, there's the major figure, the man who invented Miami Beach, Carl Fisher, Mr. Miami Beach.
Heard of him.
Deep pockets, great vision, a daring, dashing, larger-than-life person.
Elephants.
Elephants helping him with his construction projects. He came down from Indianapolis with his brand new bride. He was 35, she was 15. They had a beautiful estate on Brickell Avenue. He got into Miami Beach because he loaned some money, $50,000 to John Collins to finish his bridge in 1912. And as collateral, he took a chunk of land from bay to ocean, roughly in the area of Lincoln Road, and began to develop that and added more and more to it. Actually, he just filled in the swamp in the interior and began to dredge islands west of here, began to build great hotels on the west side and estates for his industrialist buddies on the east side of the island.
So you have wealth, he's so famous, Fisher Island's named after him.
He owned the island.
Why does he die penniless?
A number of factors. He was worth maybe $25 to $30 million in 1925, the peak of the boom. He dies with $52,000 in 1939 as an estate. Reasons being bad investments, the economic downturn, and just his own hard living. He was essentially an alcoholic.
So in the teens and the 20s, these guys really get things rolling along.
Well, they really did. In fact, in 1915, the 3 developmental firms and their developers came together to create the brand new municipality of Miami Beach. And they elected one of their own, J.N. Lummis, to be the first mayor of Miami Beach in 1915. And then, of course, in the 20s, you get this great real estate boom that just sweeps through Florida. Soaring prices of land, huge subdivisions appearing all over the place, signature buildings. It's the 20s. It's a fun time.
So you've got the boom, and now the bust starts to come in, and then you have the hurricane of 26.
Right. By the spring of 1926, this boom is over. The bust is set in, and then just a few months later, in mid-September of 26, this mighty hurricane with winds of about 130 miles an hour smashes into the area. In fact, let me show you one of the byproducts of this hurricane. Look at this bathing casino down to the south end of the beach and the destruction that was brought upon it by that hurricane. That hurricane hit on Saturday, September 18th, with winds of over 130 miles an hour, and it just kind of put an end to any hope that this boom would come back again at that time. But surprisingly, Miami Beach fared much better than the rest of the nation during the Great Economic Depression of the 1930s, and in fact, tourism began to surge here again in the mid-30s, prompting the development of the great Art Deco hotels we know today.
So it was boom time.
Indeed it was.
Why don't we go take a look at those hotels of the early era?
Sounds like a great idea to me.
Next time on New Florida, we take a look at the distinctive architecture of Miami Beach, and we'll visit the Wilsonian Museum.